Uh, Hello, good morning. We are Almudena Gardiazabal and Maria Alonso. We are here to present the comparative analysis between South Korea and Singapore. Um, Although these countries have quite in common, for example, both of them have been independent democratic states for less than a century, where although now are both relatively prosperous, they've struggled against communist elements, Japanese occupation, and foreign invaders. But when it comes to political systems, they differ. South Korea is a presidential representative democratic republic, whereby the president is the head of the state and of the multi-party system. Whereas in Singapore, the parliamentary political system has been dominated by the ruling People's Action Party and the family of the current Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong since 1959. The electoral and legal framework that the party has constructed allows for some political pluralism, but it constrains the growth of credible opposition parties and limits freedoms of expression, assembly, and association. We have applied how the theory of Aristotle, extracted from his world politics, relates to the presidential corruption in South Korea. The most striking case of political corruption was with President Park Geun-hye, President of South Korea from 2013 until 2016. She has been accused by prosecutors of being complicit in a scheme to pressure big companies like Samsung into donate $1 million into funds controlled by a very close friend, Chu Sin-sil. She was found to have used her presidential connections to pressure conglomerates for millions of dollars to donations into two non-profit foundations she controlled. Lee was convicted of payments of 49 billion won made into Choi's foundation. Park, meanwhile, the President Park, was accused of colluding with Choi and giving access to unauthorized state documents. How this scandal relates to Aristotle politics, you may ask. For this author, corruption consisted in a large part in rulers governing in the service of their own individual collective, which is exactly what President Park pursued when she used her presidential connections to illicitly fund their nonprofit.
Aristotle argues that self-interest inherent in faulty forms of government causes inequality and injustice, which leads to an instability which threatens the very mission of the state and its ability to provide a virtuous life. Precisely, and because of this, very successful economic activities and corruption that seemed invisible was unleashed. The embezzlements and money traps were getting bigger. The island was shaken daily by scandals about embezzlement, rigor, contrast, corruption of the states and private companies. Bribes were even asked to authorize the transfer of a dying person to the hospital. It was then that Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, who had spearheaded the independence movement of his land and whom they considered the father of the country, resolved to face the problem unceremoniously with anyone. The first thing she did was gather her council of ministers and told them affairs that would become famous. If we really want to defeat corruption, we must be ready to send our own families to jail if it's necessary. It was hardly increasing prison sentence for those guilty of corruption. The highest sentences were reserved for those who appropriate money destined from the most delicate social issues, such as health and education programs, or to care for poor children and the elderly without protection, which means that for him the form of government went from being impure to pure. For him the number of individuals did not matter, but whether their intentions were for the good of all or for their own interests.
Then we transfer to Francis Fukuyama. Liberal democracy is a form of representative In the same line of corruption, the author states that the capacity to enforce constitutes an area where the state capacity overlaps with the rule of law, and it's critical with dealing with a problem of corruption. The behavior of public officials depends on incentives, not just getting an adequate pay for doing their jobs, but the fear of punishment if they break the law. And that's exactly where Korea gets it right, because it puts an example saying that if you were to commit fraud or embezzlement or peddling, which is in the case of the president, you will fear with consequences, which that's exactly what happened to Choi and Park. Now we're facing with at least 20 years in prison. So effective enforcement, as was quoted by our Francis Fukuyama in the paper, was central to the success of one of the most notable recent efforts to improve public sector performance. In South Korea, they have created a commission called the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission. It was created in the 1990s. After that, the Anti-Corruption Act was enacted, and it has effectively controlled corruption. A recent review done by the World Bank showed that the ACRC has employed several innovative instruments to fight and prevent corruption. It has managed to track the level of corruption and initiate corrective measures to combat corruption-prone areas. This shows how the government has put the corruption measures in the forefront of their importance in order to establish stability and a good use of Koreans' resources.
Liberal democracy is a form of government that consists of a representative democracy in which the capacity of elected representatives to make political decisions is subjected to the rule of law and is normally moderated by a constitution that regulates it in the protection of citizens, individual and collective rights and freedom, and the constitution establishes restrictions on both the democratic leaders and the execution of will of certain social majorities within the liberal democracy. Singapore's constitution is inspired by the English Parliament. The Popular Action Party has dominated the country's politics since independence. The system of government is closest to authoritarianism than to a multi-party democracy. Singapore, being a republic parliamentary, has problems in keeping up with popular demands for democracy accountability. Modern liberal democracies combine three basic institutions: the state, the rule of law, and democratic accountability. A liberal democracy balances these potentially contradictory institutions. The state generates and uses power, while the rule of law and democratic accountability seek to restrict power and ensure that it is used in the public interest.
Thank you, that's all for now. Hope that you enjoy. Bye.